All right.
To be flexible.
All right, we are on. So welcome to another fun episode of Hosted Bar. There we go. Oh, look at that. Let's see if I can do the full Gage.
There's that sound.
I have way too much head on this thing because I was a little too aggressive in my pour and trying to get it to sound awesome, which it did sound awesome, but it's maybe a little aggressive there. Welcome Gage Mitchell to Hosted Bar. We appreciate your being here with us. We'll turn it over to Erin for the introductions.
Well, first of all, like Jeff said, he's Jeff Glazer. I'm Erin Ogden, and today we have Gage Mitchell of Modern Species. And I'm very excited to have him because his kind of was a mission-driven business long before mission-driven business was a thing that you heard. He's a graphic design firm who does awesome work, and his clients are all companies that fit in with their mission. But before we jump into that, importantly, Jeff, what was it that you were pouring into your glass?
I am pouring the Third Space the Maestro Italian style Pilsner. I've been obsessed with all these like micro styles of Pilsners lately, like a bunch of craft breweries, at least around here. Gage, I'd be curious how it is in Washington. But around here, a lot of people are doing like, it's not just Czech Pils anymore, or German Pils anymore. Now we're doing Italian Pils and French Pils and all kinds of like, micro regional Pilsners. Not that Italy is a micro region, but just never really thought of.
Well, for beer, maybe.
For beer, maybe.
For wine, it's a macro region.
Yeah, for sure. So drinking the Italian Pils from Third Space today.
Awesome. Speaking of wine, I'm going with Jen Pfeiffer's Rocket Like a Redhead. It's a Shiraz. And so I may not be going to rocket like one today. How about you, Gage? You had the beer pour sound earlier. So what do you got going on?
Yeah, I cracked it too early. I got impatient. I don't need the rocket redhead to rock my red hair, but what I have done today is I'm enjoying a nice Rogue Shakespeare Stout, and it's a nitro can that I've put in my nice little Spiegeloo glass.
Oh, nice.
I believe is how you pronounce it. From my friend Dennis Weaver, who got some of these beautiful glasses for me. So enjoying that tasty dark roast beer.
So Gage, you'll appreciate this. I'm actually drinking out of the AIGA glass that you guys did with Randy Mosher for Madison Craft Beer Week many years ago.
Which is a giant
glass. I mean, it's a 20-ounce imperial.
Yeah, it's
pint.
a proper pub glass.
But I thought this would be an appropriate glass to drink out of today.
That's great. That's perfect. Yeah, I still have some of those in my cabinet too. The graphics on some of them are getting a little worn off, but they're still wonderful glasses nonetheless.
Yeah.
So, Gage, I very briefly said how you have a mission-driven business, and it's Modern Species. But why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and who Modern Species, or what Modern Species is, other than a winged bear?
Perfect. Yeah, so who I am, I guess that could go deep, but I'll summarize it briefly by saying that I am super passionate about business, about art, or the application of art to business, which is design. I'm also super passionate about food and beverage. So if I didn't go into design or business, I might have opened up a restaurant, which I guess is food and business. And then I'm also kind of a sustainability or kind of impact geek as well, in that I just feel like if we're going to be putting a lot of effort towards whatever it is, our career, our life, or whatever, it may as well make the world a better place in the process. So I like to be indulgent and have some fun and eat some delicious food and beverage, but I also, like to make sure that I'm leaving the world a better place after I've enjoyed that delicious experience.
And since you didn't open a restaurant, you instead went the design route.
Exactly, yeah. So I got a degree in graphic design. That's where my background is, but because of my passion in business, I've just always been primarily what I read is a bunch of business books and go to business conferences and attend business accelerator programs and so on and so forth. So I have found a way to merge all of my passions into one entity that is called Modern Species. So the name originally, or the idea behind the name, is that we feel like, the world is changing. Obviously, climate change is a big thing, but also, income inequality and a bunch of other things that just kind of seems to be growing problems. So because the world is changing, we feel like it's time for our species and the business species of the world, all the businesses that are running, to evolve. So we help businesses evolve so that we can design a better world together.
Awesome. So I said earlier that you were a mission-driven business before mission-driven business thing was cool. But what does it mean to you to say it is a mission-driven business?
Yeah, I think the popularized term of the 3 Ps of the people, planet, profit is kind of a potentially good framework to consider, by which I mean historically, a business's primary goal, especially once you've gone public, is to create shareholder value. Like, the people invested in that company need to see a return, and that's the primary thing. So everything the business focuses on is driving up growth and driving up profit and cutting down margins and or cutting down costs of goods and other things so that they can make a good profit and give their shareholders a return. With the idea of weaving mission into that, you can consider either people, planet, or whatever your mission specifically is. But the idea is that gets at least an equal seat at the table, if not the primary seat at the table. And therefore, you see a fundamental shift not only in the way the business operates, because now maybe it's not about pinching every penny out of everything you possibly can, which usually results in product quality or service quality going down, 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 while price goes up, 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 and your employees' salaries go down, 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 while executive salaries and board, dividends go up, up, up. And it's just a very extractive model that is going to only go down long term, because you only have so many resources you can extract before you run out, and you got to find some other resources. Whereas I think a more mission-driven business is trying to be a little bit more holistic and take care of its people. Usually they have some greater goal they're trying to help the world achieve, whether it's some sustainability goal or some social impact goal. And they make sure that when they're making decisions that those things are, like I said, at least equal at the table with profit. Not that profit's not important, because that's what powers your company and helps you keep doing more of your mission, but that in making that profit, you're also considering the greater good of everyone involved in that business and the community you serve.
So I gave some preliminary questions. I'm going to veer off them immediately, because what you're talking about really makes me wonder. Like, you have kind of what your mission is, and but you kind of deal with it both ways, right? You let your clients and your world know what your mission is, but you also work with a lot of clients that are mission-driven businesses, and trying to get and understand what their mission is and help design their materials and their packaging and things to make that mission. And so it's really, really hard to write like mission statements and things like that. So how do you express what your mission is so people know it? Or is it not important if other people know it? It's just important if you know it.
Yeah, I think maybe the word for word mission statement, I don't think anyone your customers need to know that? Like, could anyone quote Nike's mission statement? Maybe the most successful version of that these days is Patagonia recently changed their mission statement from some long meandering thing about sustainability and all this kind of stuff to, I think they simplified it to just, we're in the business to save our home planet, something like that. So it's like, okay, well, that's easy. Everyone can remember that. But more often than not, mission statements are at least a paragraph, if not 3 or 4 or 5 paragraphs. And I think part of the reason it gets confusing when you're trying to write your own or trying to define it is that there's a lot of confusion around mission, vision, positioning, all these different strategies and tactics, and like, what do you include, what don't you include, how much detail do you put in, and how permanent are these things versus flexible or other things. So I think when I'm working with others to help them kind of really get that down on paper, to clarify what it is they're trying to do, I use the Simon Sinek's why, how, what model, because I feel like that just simplifies it and helps give you some categories to work from. So it's almost a little bit like fill in the blank, rather than having to start from scratch and figure out what it means. So I'll break that down a little bit. So like the why, of course, is why the company exists, or what your ultimate vision is, like the world you're trying to bring about. So, why you're in business in the first place, what you're passionate about as an entrepreneur. And you kind of write that in a way that ideally also speaks to your target customer, consumers, why as well. So there's probably something you share as a passion, as a fundamental goal, and that's kind of your why. That's what you're trying to bring about. The how is like how you're bringing that about. So that starts to be your business strategies for achieving those goals. And you don't want to get too much into the weeds in that statement, but you want to just talk about a high level, like, if this is what I think should happen in the world, here's how my business plays in that space, and here's what we do to try to make that happen. And then for the what, that's where you can get in the weeds and talk about all the very specific things you do that support your how, your strategies. And therefore, the why, more often than not, will remain unchanged unless something significant in your business changes. That's a little bit more about what your brand will be, so that your brand can live on. But then with that said, your strategies and your tactics, the how and what, can change from time to time. Like every, let's say, 5 years or something, maybe your how might shift a little bit, because maybe you've adopted some new services or some new solutions to help solve your problem. Like the world changes and you've got to change with it. And then the what, that can change on a daily basis sometimes on what you're selling. But the ultimate goal is to just try to package that all up. Don't get too worried about what is the mission part, what is the vision part, what's the positioning in this kind of scenario. Because more often than not, these aren't like public statements that you're putting out on the website. You'll craft the good bits of this in a way that really will speak to your audience and hopefully put them at the center of your story.
And that's one of the questions I have, right, is that these really aren't, or at least not in the normal case, Patagonia notwithstanding, that they're not normally sort of public-facing statements. They're sort of intended to be dry or intended to be internal. And what has always been sort of unclear to me as somebody involved with leadership, sort of the process of developing the mission statement and the process of sort of thinking through the why, how, what, is sort of more important than the final result. But going through it, because it's not always clear to me, like, what do you do with the final result, right? How do you ensure employee alignment with this paragraph long thing that represents the mission vision of this organization, whatever that might mean? Like, how do you ensure, or how do you get employee alignment with that? Because I don't know. I'll just stop with the question there.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I would agree with you that more often than not, it's about the process of alignment more than the final product. The final product's there just to say, okay, this is what we agreed on, but the process is getting to that agreement. And obviously, the bigger the company or the longer you've been around and the more confused the mission might be, the longer or harder that process might be. It's definitely not unheard of for a big corporation to go through like a 2-year process of engaging a bunch of different stakeholders, from their board members to their executives to their management team to their employees to even sometimes some customers and so on and so forth, to really kind of get some alignment locked down. And it's that process of hearing what other people think your business is about or your mission is about, and then comparing that to what you think it is as the business owner or the executive, and like finding that space in the middle that everyone can really agree on and that makes sense. And then once you kind of have all that information, these are all a bunch of puzzle pieces. How do these puzzle pieces click together into our positioning, into our mission, our vision, our strategies, our product offering, and so on and so forth. So I think, yes, it's about alignment is the ultimate goal. And then once you have that document, the final thing that you write down is really just to go back to as a checks and balance. Like, okay, we all agreed to this. Let's go review that and make sure that whatever we're doing fits that.
So can you?
I appreciate I appreciate that it's the journey, not the destination thing. I think the journey is important, but I think the destination is also important, because you do the journey occasionally, but we bring in, even as a small firm, we bring in employees more often, right? And in the bigger company, you bring in employees. So how to make sure both, if you're just looking internally, that they all understand what that mission is and driving towards the same thing. And so I think having it written down, having something there that is a touchstone, and making sure that the people coming in know it and buy in. Otherwise, why are they coming in, right? You don't want to sales. If you are an environmental person, you have a sales guy that's like or product development person that keeps pushing disposable things. You're like, missing the point. But also, I mean, one of the things that you help clients do is the outward facing. Right? And so having what their mission be something that is messaged out. Yeah. And I feel like that'd be hard if you were just like, well, the journey was the important part. Because I feel like I could not give you directions on how to then help me package.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. That once you get aligned, the mission statement or whatever you're working on becomes sort of an internal compass that you can use when bringing on new people and onboarding. In terms of the external communications, sometimes you're grabbing that exact mission statement and putting it online. It just depends on how well written it was and how much you took into account your consumer. But more often than not, if it's written by a bunch of business people or strategists, it might not already have the end user in mind. It's just more technical. So the external piece, maybe even in job applications or employee onboarding, they might not see the mission vision kind of draft that the executives put together, but they'll see it come to life in the onboarding process itself, because brand isn't just a visual or something like that, but it's like the entire experience. So they'll see it to come together and how they're welcomed into the company.
So what
they'll see it come together.
I feel like it's been another hour with you talking about what is brand, but we're gonna
yeah, exactly. But they'll see it in like how they're welcomed into the company. They'll see it in maybe like values will be listed as something important that they kind of evaluate their performance on, or something they strive towards. But yeah, it becomes then a catalyst for a lot of other things. Packaging, website content, social media content, like a bunch of other things are dependent upon getting to that agreement, that alignment first. In fact, in your town where I used to live, Madison, Wisconsin, there's an agency called Planet Propaganda that I kind of feel like sums up some of the process really well. And it's they've got this nice double funnel graphic where you have clarity coming in, like defining everything as much as possible till it get in the middle, and then you spread that message as far as possible, and that kind of opens up the funnel out the other side, because there's just so many different ways that you're going to communicate that, whether it's employees or consumers or shoppers or the world at large, shareholders, etc. I wish I could remember the actual words they use at the moment, because it's kind of a nice, powerful summary of that process. But that the point of writing that mission statement or whatever is that just the clarity in the middle. Like if we can all agree on this, then everyone after this has a better idea of how to do their job, which is I think what you're talking about, Erin.
Yeah, and sort of pulling all of this together, help me understand the Venn diagram, so to speak, of sort of mission, vision, culture, and branding, right? Like these are all different sides of a similar, if not the same coin. But how do these things overlap with each other? Is there a Venn diagram? Am I thinking about that wrong? Because that maybe implies that there's sort of like this perfect center, which I hear you saying that there's maybe not a perfect center where all of them align, but they at least touch each other in some ways.
Right. And so that's a really simple question, and I'm sure you can answer it in like 10 minutes.
Yeah, how hard can it be, right? We ask the easy questions.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, for sure. I think the Venn diagram model would be different depending on who you ask to draw it. By which I mean, if you ask a marketing person to do it, they'll draw a certain diagram that puts marketing either as the center or as the bigger bubble or whatever. And if you ask a branding person, the brand will be bigger than some other bubbles. And if you ask a designer, it all be kind of different. That's what I would say is, if you're thinking about brand, the easiest way I can sum it up is it's kind of the overall agreement between the company and everyone involved in it about what they can expect and what kind of how that experience will be. So that it's like building trust through upholding your promises and then spreading that out across all your touch points. So for example, the brand is the experience of the website. Your brand is the smell that they get when they walk into your retail store. Your brand is the color of uniforms your employees are wearing and what they say when they greet you. Your brand is what products you decide to make. Your brand is which nonprofits you support. All of those things are your brand, and they build up into this cumulative thing that you somewhat control, like in the decisions the business makes, and somewhat don't control, in that your customers, the community, are part of your brand, and what they say about you and what they feel about you is also your brand. So an example there might be, Microsoft can do everything in the world to try to position their brand as the cool, hip company out in the world. But if all your customers think of you as more of the business nerd, you're never going to be the hip, cool company. No matter how much you try, it's just not going to work. So you have to keep that in mind, that you can try to influence it and push it forward and design it in certain ways. But you also have to understand that a big part of your brand is consumer perception or what the community feels you are, including your employees. I think that goes back to nurturing a good company culture. Is basically, you design your culture around what your brand is. Your community, your employees are the ones who are the judge of whether or not that culture is fitting, and they have to carry it forward. So it's hard to draw a specific diagram, but I'd say they're all very interconnected.
Yeah, I think Venn diagram is maybe
as somebody in branding, I'd say
maybe a bad model for that. But,
yeah. Well, I'm going to trademark nerd out and say that it is possible to register a federal trademark in the smell of your store. Verizon and Abercrombie & Fitch both have.
There is no way Auntie Annie's doesn't have a trademark on that pretzel smell.
I don't know, because I feel like that's functional. I mean, let's not go far down, but Auntie Anne's is pretty functional, whereas Verizon and
what does a Verizon store smell like?
I believe that's the one that says it's flowery musk.
Oh God.
I feel
I used to do this. Shark Tank episode. I used to do this Shark Tank exercise with my class at the university. And one of the videos that I always had my students reenact was for a fragrance of money, and they had deconstructed the fragrance of fresh cash and put it into a perfume. And one of the best use cases of it was for in-store fragrances. They were gonna sell the fragrance for misting in banks and other financial institutions.
Wow. I think one of the best examples of fragrance I can think of is Rocky Mountain Chocolate Factory. I don't know if they've trademarked it, But if you ever walk by one of their stores, you'll notice a vent kind of outside the store that's pumping the smell of chocolate out into the streets. So as you walk by the store, your appetite for chocolate all of a sudden increases and you don't know why. And then you see a chocolate store next to you. And you're like, oh, I guess I'll go buy some.
When I was in law school in Chicago, my school was right near a chocolate factory. So every morning you'd go into school, and the whole neighborhood just smelled like chocolate. And I thought it was awesome. I don't even like chocolate, but I thought it was awesome. But like apparently the factory had had complaints from neighbors for years. Like I can't imagine like living in that neighborhood and complaining about that smell every morning. Like I just never got sick of it. But of course I didn't have to live there either. I just got to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning and I got to leave at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever.
If I remember correctly, the town of Hershey, Pennsylvania sued the Hershey factory
for
the smell of chocolate.
So for the record, Verizon is the flowery musk scent.
Okay. I'm trying to picture that. It sounds like BO covered up with potpourri or something. I'm not sure, but
Verizon. I'm trying to remember Abercrombie's now, but
maybe the musk was like their employees working in the store, and then the flowery is like what they're trying to cover it up with. I don't know. Hey, no, I'm not saying Verizon employees are gross. I'm just saying, retail sometimes it gets sweet.
I guess one question I do have is with this mission statement stuff. So much of it is internal, but so much of it is external. And so, as a mission-driven business, do you find that is it birds of a feather flock together? Do you use it as a way to screen what kind of clients you take? Or are you like, I'm into environmentalism, but sure, I'll take this plastic wrap manufacturer?
Yeah, I think it depends on how deep the company goes with it. I'd say there are probably a good number of businesses out there that have a mission, and it comes into play occasionally in their business and maybe just influences a few small things. And then there are businesses who are basically entirely built around a mission. Like if they could no longer achieve their mission, or if they succeeded in their mission, they would just shut doors. And it's not like some happy thing that makes their employees just feel better at staying and working there. It's literally the point. So if we're talking about the latter, like a truly mission-driven company where it's at the center of their business, I would say that it should be used as a filter for, and let's in this case tie brand and mission together, because if they're doing it really successfully, those two things are interwoven together to where it's like almost impossible to pull them apart. And in which case, it should be used as a filter for everything you do, like you just said. It should be whether or not, or my mission/brand should determine what products I create or what services I create. And then it should determine how I deliver those out into the world. And it should determine how much customer support or whatever I give for those products. And it should determine maybe even your pricing, if you're trying to make things more accessible for, like organic, more accessible for more people, for example. And it should reflect in hiring practices. Like there's a method of hiring that's more values-based hiring. I believe it was from the book, either Rocket Fuel or the Entrepreneur Operating System. Traction is the name of that one. And they talk about like hiring based on your values. So in which case, your mission is probably influencing to some degree, or your mission/brand is influencing that. So I would say it depends on how heavily you've woven it through. If we're separating mission from brand and it's just like, I'm a lawn care company and I like to, help the planet, so I'm just going to donate 1% of my profits to planet. And then maybe your mission's not fully woven into everything. Like maybe you'll still use some chemicals, or maybe you won't have like electric mowers. Like there could be things that aren't fully tied in, but you feel good because you give some of your profits. That would be like a lighter touch version of it. But ideally, at least that give back part of your mission is tied to your brand in some way. Like notice that I said, give back to the planet and a lawn care. Like they're both like nature driven things. So I feel like everywhere you can align the mission with the brand. And then if you want to go real deep, everything you do should be around the mission.
Yeah, I guess I'll I'll ask whether we can or should judge on that, right? That like, and by we I mean sort of a royal we, maybe a consumery we. Is should we judge businesses on whether they are that tightly aligned with their mission, or if it's just sort of talk, right? Is it just 1% for the planet and then go use gasoline lawnmowers? Or, are they really living their mission? Because I think that there are a lot of companies now that are finding out that consumers care way more than they thought they did.
Yeah. And I think that touches back on, the old term for it was greenwashing, when eco-friendly started to become the thing. So everyone started just slapping claims on things that maybe they couldn't substantiate in any real way. And I'd say there's somewhat of a growing trend of mission washing. So that's like maybe a big corporation who likes to position themselves as this amazing brand that's standing for something better in the world, but then, uses slave labor or does different things like that. And it's just very disingenuous. And I think, to your point, consumers now, in the days of internet and social media and everything, it's getting harder and harder for corporations to hide things. So the more authentic you can be and the more aligned you can be with your mission, the better. With that said, sure, there's still lots of companies getting away with just doing the occasional community charity event and, putting that out there. People see it, feel good, and then they don't dig deeper and look into every little thing you're doing and know that you're using sweatshops or slave labor or like dumping chemicals in the backyard. But I think if I were to advise a company, I would say just try to be as authentic as possible, by which I mean make sure that mission or that community give back, whatever you're doing, A, aligns with your brand so it makes sense, but B, is something you actually care about and not just something you're doing as a PR stunt, because eventually people will find out and then you'll have yourself in a PR mess.
I think we can talk about this next time, Jeff, when Gage isn't here, because I don't want to use up his time. But I guess my argument is, why wouldn't you judge them, right? They're telling you to judge me on this. If they're saying this is my mission, why wouldn't we judge you on it? Because I totally feel you're like, be authentic, be genuine. Right?
Yeah.
Kind of what we say with stuff all the time. Do what you let's write what you actually do. We say this all the time in like operating agreements and things like that, but I think it's even more true with packaging and like, just, you don't have to tell them that. So why lie?
Yeah. That makes sense. And back to what you're saying, like part of your brand is making a promise. That's maybe one of the most important parts. It's like, I'm going to give you the best widget you've ever bought. And that's kind of the promise you're making. And if the consumer gets it and you delivered them a really terrible widget, like, you have a bad brand, right? They're going to be like, well, I don't trust you. You just broke your brand, because brand is all about trust. So for the same purposes of like mission, if you say, I really care about the environment, and then people find out you've been dumping a bunch of chemicals and clear cutting forests and doing all this other kind of stuff, are they going to believe you anymore? And how much does that hurt your brand trust? And then how much are your sales going to drop, and how much are you at risk of some really bad PR? I mean, we've seen companies make stumbles, like airlines violently throwing people of color off of planes because some white person complained, and then the value of their company literally drops $1 billion overnight because of some bad PR that they got around making a really stupid choice around, like, obviously improperly training employees. So all of that ties into, it's not only like, can you make a mission statement? Everyone can throw a statement on their website, but are you living that statement? Are you standing up to that statement? Are you willing to make the tough decisions when it comes to like maybe letting an employee go and standing up for the customer or standing behind your mission? Or is it just all fluff out there to make yourself feel better and hope that nobody looks deeper? I would like to think a smart business would go deep with it and make it real, authentic, and go all the way. But for sure, there's a lot of companies who do the soft work and not the hard work.
So we are at 30 minutes, and I can't think of a better summary what a mission driven is. So thank you so much, Gage. Every time I talk to you, it makes me think about what more I can do for my business and in talking to my employees and my clients, and saying this is what we are and this is who we are. And one of these days we'll be able to afford your service.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Well, I'm always here to offer insights in between, but yeah, lovely.
Thanks, Gage.